Every film should have a dance routine of some kind. Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name is Lily Austin.
And my name's James Brailsford. Hello.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the above-mentioned Groovy Movies. How are you doing, James?
I'm all right. Yeah, good to get going. Slightly. My brain's not quite fully kicking in today, just because of our slightly earlier than usual recording time.
It's true. We usually like to record over lunch with a nice glass of red, but today needs must. It's 9 a.m. We're both a little bit sleepy and groggy, but at least we're talking about a film that's almost in keeping with, actually. I wasn't even thinking about that, but it's a film
Oh
that,
yeah, exists between sleep and awake. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And also it's one that we both know quite a lot about, so I think it should be fine. James, what are we talking about this week?
We are talking about Richard Kelly's 2001 film Donnie Darko.
Woo!
Woo!
For all our millennial
Finally,
listeners
season
out there.
5.
I know, it's crazy we've never talked about it before. It's such a, well, I don't know. I feel like it's such an quintessential film of adolescence that you will have watched when you were a teenager and felt like it spoke to you deeply. And you feel like finally I'm understood and I'm also a bit Donnie Darko and or would go out with him. Or at least was that just me?
Absolutely. I mean, it fits into that genre, doesn't it, of disaffected youth? But for me, because I've been a little bit older, this was 2001. This was around this time was so good for if you were a film lover, and especially if you'd just gone to film school and you went to the cinema. It was Memento, Donnie Darko, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I mean, 3 that came out, just great films to see as a film student. This being one of them,
Yeah, I reassert my my frequent argument that 9/11 changed everything with cinema, and pre 9/11 we were like hitting the peak of like great filmmaking, and then after that it all changed and commercialization took over, and this is like a perfect example of that because this film came out on the Halloween weekend after 9/11, and that really
Ah.
impacted the sales. So it had a budget. This film was very small budget, 4.5 mil, and unfortunately when it came out it was pretty much a flop immediately. Like no one wanted to go see a film about a depressed adolescent who has to deal with some kind of plane crash. It's just terrible
Yeah.
timing.
Terrible timing. But yeah, with that box office, it was specifically in America. It bombed. I think in America in its domestic box office, they call it. I think it was like $500,000. It was terrible.
Mhm.
I mean, God, that's one from the heart numbers. But so it absolutely bombed. Nobody saw it really. It didn't come into the pop culture. Nobody was discussing Donnie Darko in mainstream America. But then it came over to the UK, and I remember getting the DVD release of this when it came out, and there was actually like a little note in the DVD, like a one-sided printed sheet, and it was a personal like thank you from Richard Kelly to say thank you because it was actually the UK and Ireland's box office that actually helped it break even. So it made about 4 or 5 million in the UK. So not a great amount of money in the UK, but still enough to have covered its budget. And essentially, they say that it's because of the UK and Ireland adopting it and kind of really getting into it for some reason that it kind of gave it this second life. That then it got a decent home video release where it then made a fortune in home video sales.
Yeah, I read an interview with Jake Gyllenhaal where he talked about being in London for a play, and then because there was a bit of buzz around the film during press, and being like shocked at how many people came up to him and said what an amazing film it was and how much they loved it because they just hadn't had that in the US. And then because of that success, they then had them financing to do a director's cut and kind of and give it
Yeah.
a proper release on DVD in the US, where it then began to get some momentum and like and get a cult
Mm.
following over there, kind of following. And also
I was.
the song from the end of the film, Mad World, that iconic Tears for Fears song was re-recorded by the two musicians who like worked on the film and especially for it, and kind of slowed it down like the original version, which I didn't even remember. I thought that the song in Donnie Darko was the original, but no, it's like a more upbeat kind of song. And then the one for Donnie Darko, yeah, is like much more in keeping with the actual lyrics. And that became a number one, a Christmas number one in the UK that year. So it was
It was a great time because I remember being so excited that Mad World was Christmas number one, and I think it beat
so
off
cool.
one of those generic pop idols or whatever they call it, or one of those kind of competitions. I think whatever their Christmas single was, it beat that off, and it's like this quite morose song from the end of an indie film about like a time traveling teen or something. It's like, this is great. But I was thinking the same when I was rewatching it for this podcast, Lily. You know what? You hit the nail on the head. I was just thinking, Christ, this was a product of this time where these kind of films could get a chance, even though they were very low budget. But the fact that they were being made at all, that there was an audience for this kind of stuff, that it wasn't a franchise film. It's a one-off story. And I was like, oh my God, we've become used to like serialized storytelling, whether that be kind of TV episodes or like franchise films. That's like the mainstream is now that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we've already dived right in without we're just
Mhm.
assuming everyone has seen and knows this film.
Sorry,
So
yes.
I guess we'll do a quick plot summary just to like situate ourselves. Um, I I sort of wrote a plot summary and then I saw a much better and more succinct one online. So if you'll allow me, I'll read this one out. Boy meets girl in a tangent universe created by a rupture in the space-time continuum due to boy sleepwalking as a jet engine falls onto his bedroom, setting girl on the path to being run over by a car driven by a guy dressed as a demonic bunny rabbit. Then boy must set the universe back on track, sacrificing himself to save girl and the world.
I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
That's it in a
Yeah.
nutshell. And it's, I
I mean
mean,
that's kind of it. Spoilers.
and like looking back, maybe I did get it, but I don't remember as an adolescent really understanding the whole tangent universe split off from your universe concept. Like, I, I feel like that a lot of that went over my head, and I almost feel like it really doesn't matter. You can take from this film what you want. Like for me, this was a film about, the loneliness and feeling of otherness that you often have as an adolescent and the general kind of like navel gazing sadness that a lot of us have when we're a teenager. And and that everything else around it is sort of like, I don't know, some kind of physical or fantastical manifestation of that. And that was what I liked about it. And like the music, obviously, incredible music.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's. I would say it's borderline impossible to really fully follow what's going on without kind of probably rewatching it plus additional internet research. I mean, you
Hmm.
know, so just taking it as a whole kind of experience, I loved it the first time because you can't quite tell what's going on, but it's got a unique atmosphere that feels very thought through. So that kind
Mm.
of pulls you in. But watching this though, I was struck by how I think when this came out, the idea of parallel universes and tangent universes wasn't yet a mainstream narrative device.
Mm.
It certainly was. It wasn't like it was unheard of, but certainly as a storytelling tool to say, "Oh, right, he's in a tangent universe." There was much more of a what, why. Whereas now, that's now become the mainstream. I mean, kind of basically, we've since I was a child, the idea that there are parallel universes wasn't really given much scientific weight, but that's now kind of the overriding theory of essentially how the universe works is kind of parallel universes. So it's crossed over scientifically mainstream, but now storytelling, like the fact that Marvel films have got multiverses and all that kind of stuff. It's probably not as big hard a sell as it used to be, I think.
Yeah, I think reading about how difficult it was for them to get funding to get this film off the ground and how everyone found it so weird. I feel like because of Donnie Darko and the films that followed, today this wouldn't be such a weird story.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, it's actually quite the norm to have exactly these sort of parallel, everything everywhere all at once, for example, very much
yeah.
riffs on these same ideas. And it didn't certainly didn't feel like a new like the Matrix, all these things. Like and that was like so new back then. The other thing that I think is amazing about this film is that it's a period film about the 1988. So it was made when
Mm.
they came to make the film. It was about 12 years afterwards. That was a completely new thing to do a period film about a recent history, and definitely in about the
Yeah,
80s. Apparently, it was like that was like a big part of the challenge with their small budget was to do the period setting because it just wasn't a thing. Whereas now this is, completely common. We have movies set in the 2000s. Everyone understands the joy of like recent nostalgia for another, but a not
yeah.
so long ago, a familiar recent time period.
I can remember at the time actually thinking that when I was watching it, thinking this is fascinating because like I remember the 80s. I grew up in the 80s, and it didn't seem that dim and distant. So yeah, to suddenly see a recent history, that was a kind of quite unique feeling at the time.
Yeah, so we've got to talk about Richard Kelly because this is all from the brain of a 25-year-old, 23-year-old, I think, when he wrote the script. Insane.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, funnily enough, I met one of Richard Kelly's university friends who said, "Oh yeah, I knew him while he was writing the script to Donnie Darko. He'd been knocking it around for years, all that kind of stuff." But he couldn't believe that I'd heard of Donnie Darko because he mentioned it in passing as this film that his mate from university made, and I was like, "What? It's one of the best films that's ever been released in the last few years." And he's like, "Nobody's heard of it in America at all." But yeah, a very very young director to make a film that it's interesting because watching Donnie Darko, I mean, I was so excited by his what his next few films were going to be, and from watching Donnie Darko, you see a lot of potential. There's his career. It felt like there's a potential for another young Spielberg or something like that. There's a lot
Christopher
of confidence behind the
Nolan.
camera. Yeah, just like it feels like there's potential there that never quite came off. And yeah, anyway, sorry, I don't want to get too much into his post career.
Yeah, we can go into that further down, but I agree. Yeah. There's a lot of promise in this film, and it's kind of it is a little surprising that it kind of didn't go
Yeah.
much further than this. But let's focus on the positive. Let's talk about the beauty that
Yes.
is
Yes. Yeah.
Donnie
Yeah.
Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
So basically, Richard Kelly was out of film school and was like scrambling around, like, I've got to come up with an idea. I've got to make it big. Like he was feeling the pressure, the all this weight on his 23-year-old shoulders. And he read about in the news about a boy who's some ice, a large amount of ice somehow had fallen into his bedroom, and it was just by luck that he hadn't been in the room at the time, so his life was saved. And
Right.
that kind of sparked this idea of, close calls and I guess it kind of sparked the idea of the parallel universes, like what would happen if it had happened, what happens if it
Mm.
doesn't. And that was kind of the start of it really. And then he said that he wrote it in this kind of like stream of consciousness fug over 28 days, which is the amount of time in the film that the film is set over. One of the interesting things about the film is these title cards that come up saying, kind of counting down as the film
Mm.
goes on, 28 days till the end of the world, 27.3 hours till etc. And that's quite a nice thing that kind of like situates you and keeps the anticipation going, because you're like, what's going to happen, what exactly is the end of the world going to be?
Yeah, and it's actually was a great marketing tool because I remember all the marketing was about 20. It would have a countdown on the posters, so immediately you're hooked in. Like, how? Why is the world ending? How is it ending? It was a great like premise to kind of draw you in.
And it was Christopher Nolan's idea, wasn't it?
I beg
Did
your
you?
pardon.
Yes, there's always a Christopher Nolan link. So
What?
after so
You
the
found a Christopher Nolan link that I didn't know about, Lily? What
yeah,
the hell? The tables have turned. I can't.
I know
What?
this
You
this is
can't be.
now my
Yeah, I
mission.
can't
And
believe it.
in every film, I'm going to look for the Christopher Nolan and the Kubrick link, and there's
Oh,
both in this movie. Okay, so we're jumping around a little, but let's roll with it. So once the film got finished, its premiere was at Sundance Film Festival, where
mm,
it also kind of flopped. Like, first of all, no one believed that this was actually a small budget movie. No one believed it had been made but for
mm.
4.5 mil because it looked so good. So everyone,
Look,
the
yeah.
kind of the snobs at Sundance didn't like it because they were like, it's a big budget movie. It's not our kind of film. So it kind of died a death at Sundance and wasn't being picked up. So they were like, shit, it's going to have to go straight to DVD. We're not going to get any distribution whatsoever. And then somehow they managed to get a meeting with Christopher Nolan and his wife. They'd put on a screening for him.
Because this is 2001,
And
so he's just done. He's about Memento time, so he's
yes,
not done. He's not done Insomnia. He's coming up.
exactly. He'd done Memento, and I don't know, had it been released at that point?
I don't know. It was released in 2001, so I don't know. Like
Okay.
maybe it hadn't been released, but
Okay, but he sat in the screening room with his wife and the people from Newmarket who I don't who
ah,
released
yeah, yeah.
Memento, or did they produce it?
Yeah, that. No,
They didn't.
I don't know. I think they produced, released, distributed, whatever, Memento, and also Donnie Darko, didn't they? Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So that was how. So they did a screening and they weren't sure about it, but Christopher Nolan was like, "You guys have got to release this movie. This is incredible." But they did give some notes, and one of the things was Christopher Nolan suggested that we have the brackets with the the spec like because it originally in the film it was
28
just the
days.
date. It was like, yeah, 22nd of October or whatever. And his suggestion was to add that countdown just again to kind of
Yeah,
keep the
that ticking
pacing. So
clock.
exactly, exactly. And they also did a few reshoots in the summer to kind of make it a bit more, make the idea a bit clearer. So I'd be interested to see the actual original film because it sounds like it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's still already quite a confusing film, but you do get the thread through. And apparently, it was a little bit less coherent before that, but they shaped it up and then put it out, and that's the film that we see today. Unless you watch the director's cut, which is a whole other story.
Well, I was about to say, yeah, it's actually. I think you've got to be on your on alert when you're watching Donnie Darko because I did notice. I don't know if it's changed, but a few years ago, I remember browsing through. But this was a few years ago when they still had physical media everywhere. So I was browsing the DVDs, and I noticed that the only version of Donnie Darko that I could pick up was the director's cut. It did seem to be everywhere, and and I have to say, I was very excited for this director's cut. And a lesson was learned here is that sometimes the fact that there were these various factors imposed on a film that for some reason meant the director didn't have total control. In
Mm,
some cases, and I think Donnie Darko is a prime example, it made the film better, and actually allowing the director to finish it as they intended it kind of it's not the best version of the film. I was in Manchester at the time, so I came to see it at one of the cinemas in Manchester, and just to have everything spell out, it really just took away all the mystery and all the magic, and also it was so clunkily done, Lily. Like, basically, the
really?
film, it just there's just moments in the film where it goes to a full screen, essentially like a PowerPoint slide, and it's meant to be an extract from Madame Death. Is it Lady Death's? I've got her name. Madame Death. Her book. It's from the kind of theory of time travel book, but it's like it's clearly a computer graphic. It doesn't feel like an insert, and like it just pulls you out of the story just because you're suddenly like, oh right, there's now a slide I have to read, and it's not like the ones that come up in the original film where it's like on black and it's white. And the thing
Grandma
is,
death.
these
Sorry.
Grandma Death. Sorry, yes, Grandma
No,
Death.
no, I was
I
just
knew it
suddenly
wasn't quite
furious, like,
right.
yo, who was that
Who
lady?
is she
Sorry,
again?
carry on. So,
Grandma Death. Yeah.
yeah.
And so like it absolutely spells out what is happening on screen, but it just pulls you out of the story to kind of have these. It just doesn't feel naturally bedded in. It feels like they've gone, oh shit, I want to put some shots of her diary pages in, so we'll just CGI. And the thing is, those diary pages are actually available if you do the online website Mystery, and that's perfect because that's like a little Easter egg where if you're committed, you find a bit more of the story. But then it was basically that just transplanted into the film, and it clearly wasn't meant to be there.
Yes, yeah, my fiance is also a big fan of Donnie Darko, and he told me, "Oh yeah, the director's cut really makes the story very clear." And
Yeah,
that's interesting if you're interested in this in that part of it, which he very much is
yeah,
as a physicist, but I'm like the beauty of the film is
the
the lack of
mystery.
clarity. Exactly, the mystery, the like that's what's so good about it. I don't want things spelled out for me. And also, I there's something very cool about I love text in films. Like it's so cool when a book is part of a story in a film, and it's cool that you can see it on a website. We'll add the website to the show notes so you can take a look if you want. It's cool to see those pages as Richard Kelly created them because he's an incredible artist, and he actually pretty much anything you see drawn in Donnie Darko, Richard Kelly had drawn himself. The picture of the bunny's mask that you
Hmm.
see in Frank's room, that he'd drawn that himself. Um, So that's cool to see, but yeah, you don't need it in the film. Like, we get enough of the idea, and like what we
Yeah.
don't understand is adds to it. So okay, I'm glad I wasn't completely sure about what the deal was the director's cut was, but I'm glad we opted to not watch that one. I'm never going to see it. I don't want that.
I can't recommend it at all. I mean, that's why I was kind of specific when we are talking about this. Let's make sure we both watch the theatrical release because basically the I think Newmarket has, I think, essentially insisted, or whoever was about to distribute it insisted that it become underneath the 2 hour mark. So it's about 1 hour 54, including credits. So it was fairly arbitrary because then you can get extra plays of it in the multiplex. You know, you can get an extra showing in if it's under 2 hours. Once you go over 2 hours, it reduced the amount of daily showings. So that was their logic. But then it was this hit, and so it was like, right, let's give the director some money now so he can realize his vision.
Well, I'm happy for the under 2 hour version. I think it works perfectly.
I think it's an occasion where studio meddling, let's say, or studio insistence, it does actually help the film. Because a lot of times when studios start mandating things, the film feels choppy. But the thing is, because it's a dreamlike film set in a parallel universe, that kind of slightly choppy, not quite sure what's going on, works with the atmosphere of the film. Whereas I think if it was a more straightforward drama, having sudden characters and things that chop, like who's the guy in the red tracksuit, never explained, but it's okay in it's okay in this kind of hodgepodge of strange things that are happening that is Donnie Darko.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, I that kind of leads us on nicely to the production of the film because one of the interesting things about how this film got funded is that it was the casting of Jason Schwartzman that actually got the film going. And you may be thinking, Jason Schwartzman, is that guy from Rushmore? Who's he in Donnie Darko? Well, you'd be right in wondering because he was actually originally cast as Donnie Darko, and he just made Rushmore at this point. So there was a lot of buzz around him as an actor, and
Mm,
that was what the film that was initially what got the film up and running because initially when the script was passed around, people loved it, but they didn't want a 25-year-old to direct this film, his first movie, understandably. But Rich Kelly was
yeah.
emphatic, no, I'm directing it, no one else gets this movie, which I think absolutely correct. It's definitely not the kind of film you could pass on. It's all in his mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. He did a Matrix. He did a Matrix. He wanted his first debut film to be something that he directed, not just wrote.
Exactly. So a little bit of financing came through that way and a lot of buzz. And then next thing you know, Drew Barrymore invites Richard Kelly and his producer to her trailer on the set of Charlie's Angels and tells them, I love this movie. And they're like, oh, well, could you play the teacher? She's like, great, but also can my production company, Flower Films, produce the film? And they were like, yes, please, that would be great. And that was what got them the rest of the funding. So good to go, signed off. And then Jason Schwartzman basically had to drop out because of scheduling issues. Thank
Reasons, yeah.
God. Thank God. Because I'm sorry, I really don't think this film would be the cult film it is today if it wasn't for Jake Gyllenhaal in the lead. He is magnetic
He's pitch
and
perfect. Yeah, he's so good.
yeah, and I to be honest, I think he'd been in a few things before then, but this film I really think is his professional peak at such a young age. Like he's amazing in it, and I've never seen him be so good in anything else since, even though he's been in a few good movies.
Yeah, no, I think it's an iconic performance. Like I was blown away when I saw it, and it still holds up now, like 20 plus years later. Um, but yeah, when you say I didn't realize Jason Schwartzman was in the running originally, but I can see the kind of as far as like the look, the similarity, the darker hair, the kind of slightly haunted like
Yeah,
eyes. But yeah,
yeah, he
yeah,
looks
completely
tired.
different.
He looks perpetually tired. It works.
But yeah, yeah, God, it would have been a very. But the casting, though, I mean, and to see Maggie Gyllenhaal, just in a supporting role, playing his fictional sister. I mean, like the chemistry between the two of them, it's like off the charts.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal said that it was his idea to cast her because at that point they were being really competitive in reality about their acting. Because even though Maggie, as he put it, is like a more kind of is a better actor basically and a bit more serious an actor. He had actually his career had taken off before her and also him being
Mm,
younger. So they already had this energy between them. There was a rivalry going. So it actually is perfect to bring that to screen.
yeah, and at the end, where his sister's in tears, crying. I was watching that performance by Maggie Gyllenhaal. I was like, oh my god, she's really feeling that. She's devastated that her brother has died. You can see she's really going somewhere in that. It's almost a little bit too good for the film, but can't really criticize something for being too good. But you're just like, wow.
Yeah, it's so true. And that kind of so that brings us on to the filming. There's a great kind of behind the scenes hour-long video that you can
Mm,
see on YouTube.
it's
And
so good.
I mean, it's not particularly well put together. I will say that. It's literally just
Well, it's a
reams and
video
reams.
diary. It's called.
Ye
It's more like just behind the scenes. They've not done much with it.
yeah, they've really not done much. It's just clips from filming, but it's very interesting to see.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating, especially because Stephen Poster, the cinematographer, is kind of in it quite a lot. 'Cause it seems to be taken the first part of it from their location scouts, but Stephen Poster was a very very established, experienced cinematographer who was especially looking for like an up and coming director to work with because a career as a cinematographer, you want to work with some established names, some big names, but you also want to keep an eye on the up and comers because hopefully
Mm.
you'll work with them on a low budget film and they'll become big. They could become the next Tarantino and they take you with them. So he got a really incredible cinematographer, which that also helps with this low budget film. It doesn't look or feel low budget because it's beauty. It's kind of classically shot.
Well, it's amazing watching this behind the scenes footage because you really see that despite his young years, like Richard Kelly has such a clear vision for the film. He really
Mm,
sees every shot, and it's amazing seeing him plotting out there, looking at the front of the school, and him talking about how it's going to be shot, and that is how it was shot. It's his
mm,
vision is clear, and he stays true to it. And I think, yeah, it definitely helps having a much older, more experienced cinematographer by your side, because then you're in good hands. They're going to help you get that over the line and make it look the way you want it to look. Like it's a good combination.
But there was a great bit of behind the scenes back and forth that watching that because there's a sequence in a kind of a hall in a school where this motivational speaker comes on, played by Patrick Swayze, and Donnie Darko gets up and he asks, "How much are they paying you to be here?" or something along those lines. And in the behind the scenes, you can hear Richard Kelly saying, "I want that to be a crash zoom, like a crash zoom push in to Donnie Darko when he delivers that line." And the cinematographer is not happy at all. He's like, crash zooms, we should do that." Basically, he said, "A whip pan is funny. A crash zoom isn't funny." And I was like, I can't remember what they do in the finished film. And watch the finished film, and it whip panned from Donnie Darko to some of the teachers looking horrified. Then it goes back to us like, so the cinematographer was right. He won.
And I love that. It's perfect. I also love reading that Richard Kelly being so inexperienced as a director when they started filming their very first take, the very first shot. He calls action. They do the scene. Everyone's waiting for him to yell cut, and he yells and action. Oh, bless him. It's so sweet. Um, the other thing that's very interesting is that the how I mentioned that the script was written in 28 days. They also filmed it in 28 days. This whole
Really?
length of a
Ah.
tangent universe concept from the film. That this is kind of the vague theory that the film is like hung on the fact that it's the story is over 28 days because that's how long a tangent universe can survive once
Mm.
it's been created. And yeah, they did everything in those 28 days, shooting in and around Los Angeles. It's super impressive.
It was clearly a labor of love for most people involved with that production. You can tell that everyone's trying to go the extra mile.
Now, can we talk about the thing I think one of the things that makes this such a rich film is there are a lot of vignettes and additional gems within that
Mm.
like bring it all to life. The main thing is the scene when Donnie arrives at school, and we've got another Tears for Fears song playing, Head Over Heels, and we have almost like I think it was done in four shots, but the camera pans
Mm.
round and weaves around the school, and you see different members of the cast, basically, different people who are going to that school. You see Patrick Swayze for some reason talking to one of the teachers, so he's going to come up again. This strange character, and 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 apparently the production company was so against the scene. They thought it was so indulgent because it took a whole day to shoot. And then when they saw it, they saw the rushes at the end of the day. They were like, "Okay, no, we're wrong. This is incredible," because it really just like sets it up, this kind of music video-esque. setup to the
Mm.
film. I don't know what it does, but it just brings the whole thing to life. It really makes the adolescent element of the film crystallize.
Oh yeah, it's almost like it gives it a little title sequence. It kind of halfway, I don't know, partway through the film, it almost gives it like an introductory quality. But again, watching the behind the scenes, it's clear that it was intended to be a complete oneer.
Mm.
Because you can hear him discussing with the cinematographers, going like, "And okay, now the camera's going to go through the door," and you can tell that they obviously, probably the cinematographer got him to break it up into smaller chunks. And I was watching, thinking, yeah, it's much. You don't have every shot doesn't have every time you do a slightly longer, complicated take. It doesn't have to be a complete oneer. You are allowed to have different shots to cut it up, and that's a perfect example. I think it wouldn't have worked as well if it had been tried to be one continuous take, but just breaking it down to smaller shots, it all knits together very nicely.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a perfect shot. And then the other thing I really wanted to talk about is sparkle motion.
Don't question my commitment to sparkle motion, Lily.
That's what's great about this movie, that there are a few iconic lines. Suck a fuck. And I question your commitment to sparkle motion. So there's this interesting B plot. We mentioned Patrick Swayze. It's a great thing watching this movie and then being like, oh yeah, Patrick Swayze's in it, and he
Yeah,
plays this very.
lots of little treats.
It's giving. Did you ever see that Julianne Moore film? I've forgotten its name, by that director that I love. Uh,
Pedro Almodovar. No,
uh,
no, Todd Haynes.
yes,
The
yes.
film's
What?
safe.
Yes. This is very much giving a bit of safe, because we've got this, it's a bit culty, new agey, self-help guru guy. That's who Patrick Swayze
Mm.
plays. And there's this very eccentric PE teacher who is also the kind of manager of Sparkle Motion, which is this like dance troupe at the school that Donnie Darko's sister is involved, is the lead dancer of. Um, and Kitty Farmer, this is the gym teacher. She's also like number one fan, obsessed with Patrick Swayze and his whole ethos, which is that the opposite of fear is love, and we must not fear, we must love. And every issue that you have comes down to fear. I won't go into I don't want to spoil it in case you guys haven't seen it, but Patrick Swayze is not all he pertains to be. But there's this like funny, it's a strange subplot, this whole thing of that's like sparkle motion is going around in the background, and we get this incredible scene of this dance routine to Notorious. And it just really makes me think that like every film should have a dance routine of some kind, you know? It's really not, it's barely
Oh,
even like B plot. It's just a sort of an additional vignette
a
within the
detail,
film.
a bit.
Yeah, a detail. And it does end up having a connection to the bigger story. But it's pretty minor.
Yeah.
It didn't need to be that. There could be any like it's not crucial, but it's such a joy. I love that dance routine. I want to learn it.
Because you're not expecting it, and you're not, you're not really expecting. You don't know if they're going to be good or bad because they've not really been set up as if they're this amazing team or if they're a bad team. So you don't know what to expect. But then it comes on, and it's a great dance scene, and it's directed as if it's like a set piece for the film. So yeah, it kind of brings the whole film alive. Now, the thing about Patrick Swayze's character is. When you think about it, of course, that in the universe that is created at the end of the film, he never gets exposed for what he really is. So it's only in the tangent universe when Donnie Darko does the different things that he does within that tangent universe that he's exposed. And whereas when things are reset at the end of the film to go back to the main universe, he's never outed, is he?
Yeah, okay. I see now, because I was wondering what is the reason for Patrick Swayze's storyline, and I guess that does add something because it really makes you reflect on the fact that it
Yeah.
didn't perfectly solve the sacrifice Donnie Darko make doesn't perfectly solve everything, and there are pluses and minuses, there are pros and cons.
I think that's what it's there for, is that there's a character who gets unearthed, but only in this kind of parallel universe that's collapsing and that won't exist anymore. So we, the audience, get to see something of a character that in the main universe that none of them are aware of.
It's just so clever because that kind of naturally makes me then think about Richard Kelly's further output, in particular Southland Tales, which you listeners may remember we have watched. I don't know if you have.
I really have been quite perverse with my choices of films that we discuss. Like, I really put you through the ringer before we get to the good stuff.
No, but it's just amazing because with Southland Tales, to give us to give a quick recap, but do go back and listen to our previous episode on Black Check. I think it was a Blank Check movie was the episode we discussed it on, because after Donnie Darko, Richard Kelly was given more funding, like, oh, what's he going to do next? And we get a film that sort of has some similar themes, and there is something of that energy about it. There is the same mix of sci-fi and fantasy and
Mm.
surrealism mixed with kind of pop elements. I'm thinking about Sarah Michelle Gellar's character and the costume and stuff, but it just
Kristen now.
exactly, but it just doesn't hang together well. It feels jarring and unnerving. But in this, somehow, it really works.
The same kind of themes and interests are in Southland Tales, but it just doesn't all hang together. It's like Donnie Darko was it just all those things that he had in his head and the stories he wanted to tell all just worked, whereas Southland Tales just didn't. But the thing is, reading a bit more about his filmography is that he's recently said that Donnie Darko, Southland Tales, and The Box, which was his third film, are all set in the same universe. You can see The Box is him trying to course correct. The Box is him trying to
Mm.
just do something more mainstream. But again, it's not good. It's not good. But it has a sequence with like portals and water in it. I was watching thinking, hang on a sec, this is all this Donnie Darko stuff. What's this doing in The Box?
It's interesting. I do feel a bit sad about the fact that it couldn't quite work together, or he or he
Mm.
couldn't just kind of put that to one side and move on and try something else. I feel like perhaps he got a little too caught up in the Donnie Darko sphere, because when he's talking, I've read an interview with him where he talks about how he's been thinking about Donnie Darko for 20 years. Even he doesn't understand all of it. And I sort of feel like him having this revelry for this thing that he created might have held him back a little bit from moving on and truly creating his next great project. He's talked about wanting to make a sequel, and there was actually a Donnie Darko sequel called S Darko about his sister, which I never saw. I remember my sister watched it because she was also obsessed with Donnie Darko, and it sounds terrible. I think it's got 13% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Richard Kelly had nothing to do with the film because he doesn't own the rights to the property, so it's completely disconnected from anything to do with the creator. It's just a cash in from I've not watched it either. It looks terrible.
Mm. But, having said that, I am quite glad for Richard Kelly's obsession with his debut film, because it made researching this film an absolute dream because there's so much out there. And I and
Yeah.
I'm and the fact that, as we mentioned, you can online read the book that Madame Death wrote, and
Oh, Grandma Death, Grandma Death. Okay.
oh God, we did it again. Yes, Grandma Death wrote. It's just, it really does add something. And there was a website, right, that Richard Kelly made to go with it.
Yeah, well, it was like a promotional website. This is back in the days. This is only a couple of years after Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch Project was the first film where the hype and the promotion for it was all based around the website and the internet, because it played into the found footage thing, the Blair Witch Project. And then we had this one for Donnie Darko, where I can't remember the exact premise, but it's like a mystery that you have to solve. So you go on the website and you click certain links and you have to try and solve like a puzzle. And part of it is you hear the black box recording that was on the airplane that crashed into Donnie's house. So you even hear, so there's audio of that. And then as you work through it, you get, as you kind of answer puzzles, you get to read those pages from Grandma Death's book. So they're like little essentially when you solve puzzles you get rewarded with these little fragments. And that was a great experience because it meant that the true fans have kind of gone to the website and then you get a little puzzle to solve. I can't remember if I probably had to Google how to solve it, but you work your way through it and you get to hear a bit of audio, you get to read a book. It really added to the kind of, because it didn't feel like it fully explained everything. It's a bit like, to be honest, Lee, it's a bit like if someone explained exactly what's going on in 2001. It's like, it's kind of interesting, but that's not what the film's about. Knowing exactly how it all works doesn't suddenly, I don't know, you don't need to know it to enjoy Donnie Darko. It's more for out of interest. Like, it's interesting what happened, what's really going on in 2001, but that isn't what it doesn't make it any better, really.
Mm, mm. 2001: A Space Odyssey, just for anyone wondering if James is talking about the year in view.
Oh yeah, sorry, sorry. I reference it so much, I just assume everybody know. You know what I'm talking about. Sorry, Lil. Thank you. Yes, I'm very
I'm sure they did.
unprofessional of me.
No. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. But yeah, I mean, like, it really, really, again, kind of proves the point that Richard Kelly was so ahead of his time with this film to have this idea of marketing it in this way and adding so much to the lore of the film. And I think that's incredible and super impressive. And it's a beautiful film. And if you haven't watched it, watch it. And if you haven't watched it in a while, watch it again, because that was the other thing. I loved watching it again because part of me was like, is it going to stand up? I haven't watched it since I was
I
a
was the
teenager. And
same.
most films that you were obsessed with when you were a teenager don't quite hold, but it absolutely does. It's an incredible film.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking that as well. I was like, is it going to be one of these films that it was good when I was a bit younger, but maybe now I'll be like, but no, it's great. It's a definitive example of that kind of early noughties American filmmaking. Like the aforementioned Memento, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It was like this kind of little wave we had of modestly budgeted, but really kind of interesting reality bending films that kind of chopped and changed around with its storytelling. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to another episode of Groovy Movies.
Thank you very much. And if you could leave us a like or a review, it all helps get the podcast out to a larger audience.
So we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Groovy Movies is produced and edited by us, Lily Austin and James Brailsford. And James also produced the theme music.
Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Groovy Movies Pod, or email us groovymoviespod@gmail.com.
For more information about the films discussed, check out the show notes.